There is a profound miracle that occurs in the quiet moments of surrender, when we release our control and place our trust fully in the hands of God. Our trust in God is not simply a belief or an idea. It is an act of deep spiritual courage that brings a transformation far beyond what we could ever imagine. It's in the act of trusting God that we discover a new kind of peace, a peace that surpasses all understanding. Trusting God is a powerful and transformative act that holds the potential to radically change your life. It is not just a passive belief or a hopeful wish, it is a deliberate choice, an act of faith, and a profound surrender. In a world where we are taught to rely on our own strength, intellect, and resources, choosing to trust in something greater than ourselves can feel like a monumental leap. Yet, it is in that very leap of trust that we find the miracles we are so desperately seeking. The trust in God is not just about what we gain, it's about who we become in the process. When we talk about trusting God, we must understand that it is not about blind faith or wishful thinking. Trust in God is grounded in the deep conviction that He is good, He is faithful, and He is in control. The Bible says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Proverbs 3:5-6. This verse teaches us that trust is not partial or conditional. Trusting God requires a total surrender, a willingness to let go of our desire to control our circumstances, and to rest in the certainty that God's plan is better than our own. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, when the road ahead is clear and the sun is shining. But the true test of trust comes when life is uncertain, when the future is unclear, and when the challenges seem insurmountable. It is precisely in these moments that trust becomes the anchor that keeps us grounded. Trusting God is not about denying the difficulty of the situation, it's about believing that God is present and at work, even when we cannot see it. Trusting God is believing that He is in the midst of our struggle, working everything for our good, even when we don't understand the why or the how. The journey of trusting God is not always easy, and it certainly is not always immediate. It takes time, practice, and most importantly, patience. In the world we live in, we are taught to demand instant gratification. But trust doesn't work that way. Trust is built over time, through experiences, through the highs and lows of life. Every time you see God come through for you, your trust in Him deepens. Every time you take a step of faith and see that He is faithful, you grow in your understanding of His love and goodness. Faith is taking the first step. Even when you don't see the whole staircase, said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., trusting God is similar. It's about taking that first step, even when you can't see what lies ahead. It's about moving forward in confidence, knowing that God will provide the guidance, the strength, and the wisdom you need, even if the entire path isn't yet clear. Trust is like walking through fog. You can't see everything at once, but you keep moving forward, step by step, trusting that the way will become clear as you go. In moments of uncertainty, fear can often creep in. We may begin to question God's plan for us, wondering why things aren't happening the way we expected or wanted. But fear and trust cannot coexist. The Bible assures us time and again that we don't need to be afraid because God is with us. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you, Psalm 56:3. Trusting God means that even in the face of fear, we choose to believe that God is with us and that He will never leave us or forsake us. But trusting God also means trusting His timing. We live in a world where we are conditioned to want everything right now. But God's timing is perfect. His understanding of what we need, and when we need it, far exceeds our own. The psalmist writes, "But I trust in you, O Lord, I say. You are my God, my times are in your hands." Psalm 31:14-15. When we trust God's timing, we allow Him to work in us and through us in the most profound way. Trusting His timing allows us to let go of impatience and frustration and to rest in the peace of knowing that everything is happening just as it should. When we trust in God, we also learn to surrender our own desires and ambitions to His greater plan. The act of surrender is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It takes great courage to let go of our own control and allow God to lead us. Jesus Himself, in His greatest moment of surrender, said, "Not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. If Jesus, the Son of God, could surrender His will to the Father's plan, how much more should we, His followers, trust in His divine will for our lives? The miracle of trusting God is that, in surrendering, we find freedom. Trust releases us from the burden of worry, anxiety, and fear. It frees us from the need to constantly figure things out or to have all the answers. Trusting God means that we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We can rest in His strength, His provision, and His protection. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Philippians 4:6-7. Trust brings peace, a peace that the world cannot give, a peace that is rooted in the knowledge that God is in control. And that peace that passes understanding, is the miracle of trusting God. It is a peace that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, God's love for us remains unshakable. His promises are sure, and His faithfulness is unwavering. Trusting God is the key that unlocks the peace we all long for in our hearts. If you are facing a difficult situation today, I encourage you to place your trust in God. Do not lean on your own understanding or try to navigate your circumstances on your own. Instead, choose to trust Him with your whole heart, knowing that He is good, He is faithful, and He is working everything for your good. Trusting God may not always make sense in the moment, but it will always lead you to a place of peace, growth, and deeper intimacy with Him. The miracle of trusting God is that it transforms us. It changes the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves, and the way we see God. It is in trusting Him that we discover the full depth of His love and faithfulness. So, trust Him with your life, trust Him with your future, and trust Him with your heart. He is worthy of your trust. Trust is not a passive feeling, but an active decision to place our confidence in something greater than ourselves. It is the cornerstone of all healthy relationships, and most importantly, it is the foundation of our relationship with God. When we trust in God, we open ourselves up to an incredible journey, one that leads to peace, purpose, and transformation. Trusting God is not always easy, but it is always worth it. The Bible repeatedly calls us to trust God with our hearts, our lives, and our futures. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we are told, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." This isn't a suggestion, it's a command. God knows that when we place our trust in Him, He will guide us in the right direction. Trusting God means surrendering our need for control and acknowledging that He sees the bigger picture, one that we may not yet understand. In times of uncertainty, when the future seems unclear, it's easy to fall into doubt. But that is when trusting God becomes most powerful. As Corrie ten Boom once said, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." It is precisely in those moments of uncertainty that we can lean into our faith, knowing that God's plans for us are always good, even when the road is tough. The miracle of trusting God is that it changes us from the inside out. It shapes our character and refines our faith. Trusting God requires us to let go of our fear, our anxieties, and our doubts, and embrace the peace that only He can provide. When we place our trust in God, we are no longer relying on our own limited understanding. We are relying on the infinite wisdom of the Creator, who knows what is best for us. As Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." It is important to remember that trusting God doesn't mean we will never face hardship or pain. In fact, we will often face trials that test our faith and challenge our trust. But it is in those moments that trust becomes our anchor, as Romans 8:28 assures us. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Trusting God means believing that, even in the most difficult circumstances, He is working things out for our ultimate good. When we trust God, we also learn to trust His timing. We live in a world that demands instant gratification, but God's timing is always perfect. As Psalm 27:14 says, "Wait for the Lord, be strong, and take heart, and wait for the Lord." Trusting God means waiting patiently for His plans to unfold, trusting that His timing is far greater than our own. Sometimes we may not understand why things are happening the way they are, but when we trust God, we trust that He is always at work, even when we can't see the immediate results. Trusting God is an act of faith that leads to freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from anxiety, and freedom from the pressure to control every aspect of our lives. When we trust God, we can rest in His love, knowing that He is in control, and that we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. As Jesus said in Matthew 11:28-30, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." The more we trust God, the more we experience His peace. That peace isn't based on our circumstances, but on the unshakable truth that God is with us, guiding us, and holding us in His hands. The trust in God brings us to a place where we no longer have to worry about the future, because we know that He holds it in His hands. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord Himself is the rock eternal, Isaiah 66:4. It is in this trust that we find the strength to face any challenge, the courage to walk through any storm, and the confidence to step into the future that God has prepared for us. In the end, trusting God is not about having all the answers. It's about having confidence in the one who holds the answers. It is about resting in His love and His goodness, and knowing that He is always faithful, even when we don't fully understand His ways. Trusting God is a choice, but it's the choice that leads to freedom, peace, and a life that is lived with purpose. So take that step today and trust in the one who is always with you, always for you, and always working things out for your good. There are moments in life when we feel as though we are walking through a storm, when the winds of doubt, fear, and uncertainty blow fiercely against us. During these times, it's easy to feel lost, to feel as though we are out of control, and to wonder whether the path we are on is the right one. But it is in these very moments that we are called to trust in God's timing, to understand that everything is unfolding according to His perfect plan, even if we cannot see it in the moment. Trusting in God's timing isn't always easy, but it is always right. It is in these moments of waiting that we discover not just patience, but faith that goes deeper than we ever thought possible. The Bible is clear that God's timing is perfect, as the psalmist wrote in Psalm 31:14-15. "But I trust in you, Lord, I say, you are my God, my times are in your hands." This profound statement reminds us that God has complete control over our lives, and that His understanding of time far exceeds our own. We often feel the pressure to make things happen on our timeline, but when we trust in God's timing, we release that pressure and allow God to work in ways that are beyond our understanding. Trusting His timing means we no longer have to fret over the future, because we know that He holds our times in His hands. It's tempting, when things aren't happening the way we envision, to believe that we've been forgotten, that God is somehow delayed, or that we've missed the mark. But we must remember that God doesn't operate on our clock. The Apostle Peter reminds us in 2 Peter 3:8, "With the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. His perspective of time is eternal, and His plans unfold in His perfect way." Trusting God's timing is about surrendering our need to control the outcome and accepting that God's timing is always better than our own. There's a powerful lesson in understanding divine timing. Take, for example, the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, the son who would become the father of many nations. Yet for years, nothing happened. They waited, prayed, and hoped, but time seemed to pass without fulfillment. It wasn't until they were well beyond their childbearing years that God's promise came to fruition in the form of Isaac. Their story teaches us that even when it seems like the promise is delayed, God's timing is never late. For the vision is yet for an appointed time at the end. It will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Habakkuk 2:3. In other words, no matter how long the wait, God's promises are always fulfilled. Trusting in God's timing isn't about sitting idly, doing nothing. It's about living with faith and patience, actively waiting with hope, knowing that in God's time, everything will come together. Trusting God's timing doesn't mean we stop working or planning. It means that we align ourselves with His purpose and trust that He will open the right doors at the right moment. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans, Proverbs 16:3. When we commit our lives, our plans, and our dreams to God, we acknowledge that His timing will guide us in the right direction, even when we don't see the full picture. The act of waiting is an integral part of trusting God's timing. It is in the waiting that we are shaped and refined. It is in the waiting that our character is developed and our faith is strengthened. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Isaiah 40:31. Waiting on God isn't a passive exercise, but an active trust that He is working behind the scenes. When we trust His timing, we allow Him to mold us and prepare us for what's to come. There is also a profound peace that comes from trusting in God's timing. We live in a world that values speed and instant results, but God's timing brings a peace that surpasses our understanding. We may not always know what the future holds, but when we trust that God is in control, we don't have to fear it. We are reminded in Philippians 4:6-7 to be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. This peace comes from knowing that God is in control, that He is working all things together for our good, and that His timing is perfect. Trusting God's timing is not about passively waiting for things to happen. It's about living actively in the present, knowing that He is preparing us for something greater. It is about learning to trust, even when the way forward isn't clear, and to embrace the season of waiting with hope and expectation. As we wait, we build our trust in Him, knowing that His plans are better than anything we could imagine. There will be times when we are tempted to rush ahead, to force things to happen on our own terms. But rushing can lead to frustration, mistakes, and missed opportunities. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Galatians 5:22-23. Self-control in our waiting can lead to the peace of knowing that God will act at the right time. Trusting in God's timing requires patience, faith, and humility, but the reward is great. In life, we will inevitably face seasons of waiting, whether it's waiting for a dream to be realized, waiting for a breakthrough, or waiting for clarity in a decision. During these times, we are called to trust God's perfect timing, to believe that He is always working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. Trusting God's timing is not always easy, but it is always worthwhile. When we trust Him, we are reminded that we don't have to have everything figured out. We don't have to control every outcome. We simply need to trust in His plan, His purpose, and His timing. As we embrace God's perfect timing, we discover a new piece of peace that comes from knowing that we are in His hands, and that His ways are far higher than our own. So no matter where you find yourself today, no matter how long you've been waiting, know that God is at work. His timing is always right, His plan is always good, and He will bring everything to fruition in His perfect moment. Trust Him, wait with hope, and let His timing be the rhythm of your heart. In life, there are moments that challenge us, moments that push us to the edge of our strength, and moments where we must decide whether to keep moving forward or to give in to the obstacles in our path. It is in these moments, more than any other, that we need to remind ourselves of one simple, yet powerful truth: we do not face our struggles alone. When we trust in God, we open ourselves to a strength greater than our own, a strength that is unwavering and eternal. The Bible speaks consistently about the power of trusting in God, and it reminds us time and again that we are not to rely on our own understanding or strength. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." This is not a suggestion, it is a command. Trusting in God means surrendering our need to control our circumstances and choosing instead to place our confidence in His wisdom and love. When we let go of our desire to control, we open the door to peace and clarity. But trust isn't always easy, especially when the path ahead seems unclear or when the future appears uncertain. Life can bring confusion, frustration, and fear, and in those moments it's easy to wonder whether we will make it through. Yet it is in those very moments that trust becomes our greatest weapon. As Corrie ten Boom wisely said, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." Even when we cannot see what lies ahead, we can trust that God does, and that He has a plan for us far greater than we could ever imagine. Trusting in God means we embrace His timing, even when it doesn't align with our own expectations. We often want things to happen on our timetable, but God's timing is always perfect. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." When we trust God's timing, we are acknowledging that His plans for us are greater than our own, and that His understanding far surpasses our limited view. Waiting for God's perfect timing is an act of faith, and it is often in the waiting that we grow stronger, more patient, and more aligned with His will. Trusting in God also requires letting go of fear. Fear has the power to paralyze us, to keep us from stepping into the future that God has for us. But when we trust God, we understand that fear has no hold over us. In 2 Timothy 1:7, the Bible says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind." Trusting God means choosing to walk in His strength, not our own, and to reject the fear that seeks to keep us stagnant. When we trust in God, we are assured of His faithfulness. In the midst of trials, we may wonder if God will come through for us. Yet time and again, we see that God is faithful to His promises. The Apostle Paul in Romans 8:28 tells us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Trusting God means believing that no matter what comes our way, God is working everything for our good. So, if you find yourself in a season of uncertainty or struggle, remember that trust is the foundation that will carry you through. Trust in God's wisdom, trust in His timing, and trust in His unfailing love. When you place your confidence in Him, you will find strength, peace, and a sense of purpose that surpasses all understanding. As you trust, remember that God has promised never to leave you or forsake you. He is with you every step of the way, guiding you, strengthening you, and leading you toward a future full of hope and promise. Trusting God is not always easy, but it is always worth it.